Good morning, my name is Richard Boyle and I'm here to talk to you this morning about an EPA-funded research programme being carried out by the Institute of Public Administration into water governance in Ireland, a review of structures and processes. So this is giving you the findings from year one of a 2-year EPA-funded research programme. We have two main objectives. One, to review water governance arrangements to inform thinking in respect of the current preparation of the third cycle River Basin Management Plan, due to run from 2022 to 2027. And that's the main focus of my talk here this morning. And the second main objective, which is in relation to the second year of the research programme that we're currently embarking on, to share learning to emerge from water governance in respect of other challenging policy areas. But as I say, my main focus this morning is on the first objective, reviewing the water governance arrangements that were put in place for the current River Basin Management Plan. For those of you who are interested in more details of the research after the presentation this morning, just to let you know that we have 4 main research outputs that have recently been published and are freely available to download. One, reviewing water governance arrangements using the OECD Water Governance Indicator Framework. One, examining water governance in Ireland using what the academic literature calls an experimental governance lens. One report looking at case studies on local catchment groups in Ireland to give a more local perspective, and a paper reviewing the Water Forum as a vehicle for stakeholder engagement. So if you're interested in more details, and the links are given there on the slide that you can follow up later on if you wish to. So what do we mean by water governance? The OECD have a nice definition: the range of political, institutional and administrative rules, practices and policies, formal and informal, through which decisions are taken and implemented. Stakeholders can articulate their interests and have their concerns considered, and decision makers held accountable for water management. So just to unpack that a little bit, governance is a means to an end, in this case, better water quality, not an end in and of itself. It addresses the role of institutions and relationships. It's not only about structures, obviously structures are important, but it's about institutional factors and relationships as well. And it's much broader than government, as it seeks to include the private sector, civil society, and a wide range of stakeholders. Some of you will be very familiar with this slide, which sets out the current governance arrangements put in place for the second cycle River Basin Management Plan. Some of you may be less so, so to just briefly go into it, and also I suppose to preface my comments on the current arrangements by saying these arrangements were put in place in response to criticisms from the European Commission and others about the governance arrangements put in place for the first cycle River Basin Management Plan, which were seen to be insufficient, lacking in cohesion and coordination. So the current arrangements are essentially a 3-tier governance structure. At the top tier, you have the Water Policy Advisory Committee, a group of senior public servants from departments and agencies who provide policy advice to the Minister, working alongside a Water Forum, a statutorily established body that are involved in representing different stakeholder perspectives to give their views on water policy issues. At the middle tier, then you have a National Coordination and Management Committee who coordinate the programme of measures that are in place for the current River Basin Management Plan and oversee the process, feeding their views and information into the Water Policy Advisory Committee. And they work alongside a National Technical Implementation Group chaired by the Environmental Protection Agency, which, as the name implies, provide technical implementation support and deal with operational issues. And then crucially, at the local level, You have the various local authority structures. There are 5 regional committees that have been put in place to develop regional plans and priorities for actions to address water quality issues and ensure their implementation. And they work alongside a local authority waters programme, LawPro, that again, many of you will be familiar with, who provide a shared service for the local authorities in terms of both catchment science and engagement with communities in the priority areas for action. So this is the broad governance structures that were put in place for the current River Basin Management Plan. In our research then, we found that essentially the new governance structures are a significant improvement on those that were put in place for the first cycle River Basin Management Plan. And we are not suggesting any radical changes to the structures for the next cycle. But we did find they have a number of limitations, a few of which are spelled out here. We saw a need for greater clarity about the role of the different committees and greater need for engagement in terms of the quality and substance of that engagement. What we found was there was a lot of information sharing going on at those committees, the different levels of committees, but not enough substantive engagement on discussions on the policy issues involved. As one of the interviews we talked to somewhat jocularly put it, but making a serious point, have we had any rows yet? No. Do we need any rows? Yes. You know, there needs to be a bit more substantive engagement than just information sharing. The relationship between the Water Policy Advisory Committee and the Water Forum needs work. There are some formal engagement arrangements, but if you talk to many members of the Water Forum, they would say the engagement with the Water Policy Advisory Committee is essentially non-existent, and concerns amongst members of the Water Forum about the impact of their work and their submissions on policy to date and how that might be improved. We found there was a need for overall greater engagement amongst local authorities. Some local authorities very engaged and doing a lot of really good work. Others maybe less so, leaving some work to LawPro and the relationship between the local authorities and LawPro itself, maybe needing a little bit more work to get addressed to make sure that they're working effectively together. And also at the local level, people spoke very positively about the regional committees and the work that they are doing, those who are involved, but they lack transparency at the moment. So there are, for example, there are no public minutes of the meeting or records that the plans they have are not published, or the work that they're doing. So there needs to be a bit more transparency of work about the regional committees if they're to be more effective. I want to talk about also, as I said, it's not just about structures, the governance, it's about a number of other issues. And just given the short time available, I'm just going to pick out 2 or 3 points to highlight. One of the issues that we came across was monitoring and evaluation and how effectively that's been done by the governance arrangements. And we found that while final outcomes have been clearly established in the plan and quality and activity levels are being tracked, you know, there's some very good monitoring going on in terms of water quality and so on. There is limited oversight of the extent of progress being made within the priority areas for action and in individual catchment areas. There's a lot of measurement going on of activities that are underway and of the final outcomes in terms of water quality. But as we all know, the final outcomes take a number of years to achieve. And what there needs to be more of a focus on is progress towards those final outcomes. What's happening as a result of all this activity of going out to meet and engage with farmers, for example, to improve their practices? What progress is being made there? Similarly with engagement with communities. It's not just about the number of meetings that are being held with them or the number of people that turn up, but what happens then as a result of that activity. The 3-year cycle and COVID-19 have obviously been mitigating factors in being able to develop those indicators of progress. However, the absence of any sort of midterm review or evaluation we saw as a gap. The Water Policy Advisory Committee and the National Coordination and Monitoring Committee have prescribed roles in respect of monitoring and evaluation, but neither appears to have developed that role in a formal way, and that's something we feel needs to be addressed more in the third cycle. And certainly stakeholders expressed to us a high degree of frustration with this situation with regards to monitoring and evaluation of progress being made in actually implementing the River Basin Management Plan. And again, it's an issue we see needs to be given a fairly significant higher degree of attention in the next cycle River Basin Management Plan. Another key emphasis in the plan was on encouraging local level innovation and lesson learning, that people could experiment at the local level, develop good practices, and that these would be learnt from and spread more widely. And we feel that more attention needs to be given by the Water Policy Advisory Committee, the National Coordination and Monitoring Committee, and the National Technical Implementation Group to learning the lessons from local initiatives and projects with a view to determining the potential for scaling up of lessons learned and the spread of effective practices. There's a particular need to look at mainstreaming the knowledge and experience gained by LawPro and the ASAP programme across local authorities in Chagask. So at the moment, there's a lot of really interesting work being done by LawPro and ASAP to get more of a sense of what of that is really effective, how can that be spread across local authorities in Chagask, because the number of people in LawPro and ASAP is obviously quite small, focused only on the priority areas for action, and there needs to be action across all local authority areas and across all catchment areas, not just limited to the priority areas for action. So mainstreaming that knowledge and experience gained is something that needs particular attention. We also found that many of the community water projects are very engaged, but struggling to get a firm foothold in terms of their involvement with the governance arrangements. And that's something that we emphasise in that local report I mentioned, where we look at a couple of case studies of how catchment areas and projects there are being addressed. I also want to mention the issue of policy coherence, because this is something that's obviously very important from a governance perspective, how well water policy coordinates and coincides with other policy areas. And we felt that there was a need for closer policy and practice linkages, between areas like water quality, climate change, and biodiversity, and the whole agricultural policy area. And at the policy level, this involves the next River Basin Management Plan being more explicit about the linkages and the need for coherence across these themes. In other words, it's no use challenging people to change practices if the policy is pushing them to do something that is contrary to your policy. So you need that coordinated policy area. So the final point I want to make is drawing more wider lessons about challenges for integrating policy. If that's a challenge, which it often is in the public sector, how do you deal with that? In reality, hierarchical structures often take precedence. So we need to encourage more inclusive, deliberative policy design. Collaborative governance can't be realised without local leaders with the authority and resources to implement change. And leadership capacity building is needed. The more you can have good people with good skills in the right place, you can overcome other problems if you've got that good capacity. So capacity building, maintaining it and developing capacity is crucial. Project management teams seconded from various agencies have been used in other examples, like Prime Minister's delivery units, and seconding people into those who subsequently can learn lessons from that and then go out and spread the message can be one helpful way of developing more integrated policy across the system. There's a need to focus more on developing what we term intermediate outcomes, these progress steps towards the final outcomes along the way, and that's something that can be very helpful. And finally, the need for a community-driven approach. It's about co-creation and co-production of services, and that is crucial to developing buy-in and getting an effective approach to more coordinated and integrated policy. So hopefully that gives you a brief overview of some of the key points that we've made in the research so far. As I say, we are currently in the second year now, trying to broaden out the lesson learning from what we have examined so far. But the idea is to feed into the next cycle river basin management plan. Thank you very much.